Now I'm not sure this exactly had to do with script writing, but I remember when it first came out, I mean, some of my friends didn't like the dub of Osaka Dial because of the way they made Osaka talk.
That's a very good point that you bring up.
On the other hand, I didn't think it was too bad, and when I read the notes and said they picked for a Houston accent, I thought, oh, that's very good. I thought it was a very good choice because people in New York or Los Angeles probably referring to people in Houston as hicks. So I'm sure they would.
The reason that's done is, and you'll see this as a recurring theme in a lot of shows, and even in manga, if you read manga, you'll always notice that anybody who has a Kansai or an Osakan dialect, that their dialogue is written differently. Here's the thing, honestly, most of us when we hear people talk in Japanese,
right,
they're speaking in Japanese.
Right.
To tell you the truth, people that speak Japanese, if they're hearing somebody speak in English, they don't know if they're from England, if they're from New York, if they're from Los Angeles, if they're from Houston, if they're from Australia. It's just English. They don't hear that accent. We hear it. I mean, you can instantly hear someone go, "Oh, they're from Australia. That guy's from England or whatever." You can hear that accent. They don't hear it. We don't hear an Osakan dialect. We really don't. We hear that the person is speaking in Japanese. To any Japanese speaker, that Osakan dialect is so glaring. It's so different. And that is why when a show is done here and the person has an Osakan dialect, which is generally considered to be kind of a blue-collar feel, kind of a working class, and usually depending on where it's dubbed, they'll either go with something like a Brooklyn kind of a dialect or they'll go with a Southern dialect. And the reason is because everybody else in the show is going to have a standard American accent, and that one person who has a different accent, we hear it and we make that connection. It evokes a certain feeling to us. We get something from that. We hear that accent and we associate certain qualities with that accent. It means something to us, and it's a very good way of making that association, because we can't really speak in an Osakan dialect in English, and if we did, what would it sound like, and how would people know what that was? So that's the reason for doing it, because in the vast majority of any TV shows, really, any kind of a TV show or movie that you see, most everyone is speaking in a standard American accent. And if they're not, there's a specific reason for it. They want you to notice this person doesn't sound like all of the other people. And that's the whole point. And so that's why with Kira, she was basically just doing a Texas accent, and that was because they wanted her to sound different. And Osaka's in the South, Texas is in the South. When I worked on Comic Party Revolution, I was the writer on that show, and I also played a character called Yui Nagawa, who had a Kansai accent, and in that particular show, we gave her a Brooklyn accent. It just really, really worked for that character. It worked really well. And usually I find in manga that they do tend to kind of go with that use guys kind of thing for conveying that Kansai dialect. But that's not an exact translation. They're not literally saying in Japanese, use guys. They're not saying that. So that's just an interpretation. Another example would be the character of Peorth in Oh My Goddess. Someone asked me why she didn't have a French accent in the anime, and I'm like, well, she's not French. And I actually had not gotten up to reading that part of the manga, and then I started reading the part of the manga where Peorth is in it, and reading the actual translator notes about it. And the thing is, in the Japanese version of the manga, Peorth is sort of haughty. And so what they decided to do to sort of affect that in the English version of the manga was that once in a while she would throw out a little je ne sais pas, or whatever. She would throw out some little French phrase here and there to convey that kind of snootiness, moi, you know, so that's why that was in there. And we did actually have some of that in the English version, but she didn't have a French accent. She's not French. She's a goddess. She's from heaven, so. She has a heaven accent, you know? That's the kind of accent she has. But yeah, so you have to kind of make those different choices as to how someone will speak to convey what it is you want to get across. There's a character in the second half of The Wallflower to Mao who is extremely proper, and she speaks in extremely formal Japanese. And the way that that is going to be conveyed in English is that she has a little bit of a proper British accent, and that will convey a certain feeling to people watching in English. They'll get that. They'll get that sort of proper genteelness that, you know, the character has from it.
So as you wrote a script, then, as you adapt the script, you include these kinds of notes in the script itself, saying, look, this is the attitude, this is the approach.
Oh yeah, and a lot of times when those are notes that are already in there from the translator.
Right.
And one thing that I will always do is I always leave the translator notes in the scripts because I think they're very important for the actors and the director. When you're in the studio, sometimes the character says something and you go, what the heck does that mean? And I've noticed in the past a lot of, I don't know why, but a lot of scriptwriters take that out. And I think it's really important. And in fact, myself, I spend a lot of time doing research on the shows, and if there's something that I feel is in any way unclear, I'll always put a note in the script to explain a certain term or what this is a reference to, because I think of it as an actor. If I'm an actor and I'm saying this line, how am I supposed to deliver it if I don't know what I'm saying? You know, you just really can't deliver it correctly if you don't know what you're talking about. But as soon as you understand what it is, you can say it that with conviction.
Which would have been my follow-up question,
Right.
is how much of this comes from the translator notes, and how much of that comes from your own research into the manga or into
It's a little of both. It's a little of both. And also, I know with all of the scripts that I've worked on with ADV, they have all been gone over by a minimum of 2 translators and sometimes 3 translators. And the idea is that one of the translators is a native Japanese speaker and one of the translators is a native English speaker. And it brings a really good mix on that because people will pick up on different things that the other person hasn't picked up on. Sometimes a Japanese person that's watching it won't even think twice about a certain line because they just understand it and would never think that it would need an explanation in English. And I came across a line like that. Oh, I know. It was actually my character, Auntie. I don't want to give away too much of a spoiler, but Auntie is very privileged, you know, and she has lots of maids and servants and everything, but she's going to really try to behave like a normal housewife. So she's going down to the market, you know, and she's trying to buy things at the market, and she's going to get this radish, and she pulls out her Aero-chan Express card because she never leaves home without it. So she pulls out her credit card to pay for this radish. That's like $1, you know. And in marketplaces like that, you can't use credit cards, it's cash, you know. But she's not even used to that. And so the guy's response is, we don't take phone cards here. And I was looking at the translation, I didn't get it. But then when the second translator went back over it, and now she's a native English speaker who did live in Japan, she was explaining this, they don't take credit cards there, so the joke is, he doesn't even know what a credit card is. He's seen it and he thinks it must be some kind of a phone card or something because he's not even familiar with credit cards because he's this, you know, just a simple farmer who works at the market selling his radishes and he only takes cash, so he doesn't. So, you know, that's just 5 minutes. That's just an example of something that when the Japanese translator looked at it, didn't even make a note. And when I saw it, I'm like, what does that mean? Because we don't take phone cards here. I didn't really understand why that would be the response. But then once I read that note, I go, oh, of course, now I get it. I haven't had to write that line yet, so I haven't exactly figured out what the person's going to say and how many mouth flaps they have, and but I will somehow try to make it clear in the response that that's the idea anyway. What all I just explained to you, and why it's supposed to be funny, and hopefully it will be very funny. That is the idea. But